Hi, everybody. Today, I'm excited to welcome Debra Prinzing, author, journalist, and the founder of the Slow Flowers movement. Debra has spent years championing local and sustainable flowers and has spent the last several years producing the influential Slow Flowers Summit. Today, she's here to talk about her brand new book, The Flower Farmers: Inspiration and Advice from Expert Growers. The book was co-authored with Robin Ovney, a creative director and designer who has collaborated with Debra on numerous floral and lifestyle titles. And joining us also is Xenia D. Ambrosi, one of the farmers featured in the book. Xenia runs Sweet Earth Co., a sustainable flower farm and floral design studio in New York, where she grows specialty cut flowers and herbs and teaches eco-friendly gardening and floral design. Together, we'll explore the stories behind the book, the wisdom of flower farmers, and the inspiration they bring to our garden and our lives. So let's get started, and as we do, this message from today's sponsor, the Ultimate Gardening Sheath, the perfect tool companion for whatever you grow and wherever you garden. Debra and Xenia, welcome to this podcast episode. I have been just pouring into your book and just loving everything about it. The pictures, the stories, the features of, I think it's 29 flower farmers. And Xenia, you're here. Welcome as one of the people featured in this book. So we get to hear your story firsthand. But congratulations on this beautiful book, and thank you for taking some time to share some of this content with us.
It's wonderful to talk with you again, Joe. Thank you so much for hosting us.
Well, you're welcome. And I do love the subtitle too, by the way, Inspiration and Advice from Expert Growers, because a lot of our audience listeners are flower farmers themselves, but many of them are, maybe they're wannabe flower farmers or they're curious about the industry, or if nothing else, they love growing flowers. So some of these takeaways that I hope we can get from our conversation today will be invaluable for everyone. So what I'd like to do maybe for today, I have some questions sort of set up to maybe let you tee off on. But before we do that, I would like for us to get kind of our finger on the pulse of where we are with the state of the industry. And Debra, I know you've been plugged into this for a long time. As Xenia, you're certainly very much a part of this on a day-to-day basis. So maybe from both of you, your thoughts here.
Sure. Well, I'll start out by saying that, we have witnessed this rise of the floral influencer, for lack of a better term. In social media, we see all kinds of beautiful flower posts, and people are lured by that. And I think that's partly contributed to the excitement about okay, I'm a gardener and I see what Xenia is growing and she's growing for professional florists. How do I get my hands on those varieties? How do I emulate what the flower farmer's doing? So we come up with a little tagline, garden like a flower farmer.
Hmm.
I'm not promising that the flower farmer book will teach you how to do this, but you'll get some really valuable insights and tips and expert kind of growing advice from people like Xenia. So I think what's behind it though, Joe, really goes back to the slow food movement and the sort of focus on organic gardening, the focus on sustainability. And we really saw a spike during COVID where there was a threat to the supply chain in the floral industry, although Xenia and I have been active in this, long before that. But for the mass consumer, that all of a sudden we were like asking questions or hearing questions like, who does grow my flowers and where are they grown and what methods are used? And oh, I'd love to support local floral agriculture. I'd love to support my local farmer and keep those resources in my community. And so all of a sudden, this is really in the zeitgeist and it's really exploded. And I will just give you a few numbers if you're interested.
Yeah.
According to USDA's 2023 Floral Culture Survey, the number of producers totaled 10,216 compared to about just shy of 9,000 in 2022. So that's about a 17% increase. And that has been going on back to the first time I started reading these surveys in, I think, 2005. And so every 5 years, there's a USDA floral culture census, and that 17% growth of farms reporting that some or all of their acreage is devoted to cut flowers is consistent. And ironically, we're talking about people like Xenia who are growing on 1 acre, perhaps up to a $500,000 farm. So USDA is defining small farm in a different way than maybe we are.
It even goes back further than that. I mean, the history that you brought out in some of your previous books, Deborah, and certainly in the foundation of the slow flower movement, is that floriculture had such a large presence in our economy back in the 70s, 60s, 70s. And it wasn't until the 80s where we really saw that flip on its head through politics and policies and all of that. So where we were producing, I think it was 70 to 80% of our own flowers in the United States. After the 80s, we were down to the 20% range. And 70 to 80% was being introduced from international markets. So I think the slow flowers movement, like the slow food movement, was an emphasis um, on local flowers, on not only putting dollars behind supporting local farmers, but also taking it one step further. Well, how local? Well, as local as my backyard. And so that's like the kind of the connection where we were teaching people and inspiring people to garden like a flower farmer because we wanted to bring that focus and attention back to local product.
So, Xenia, you mentioned there were a number of factors that led to a smaller market share by U.S. growers to overseas growers. Um, and now with this movement back to slow flowers and more flower farmers growing back here in the States, do we now know what the ratio is between U.S. grown flowers versus the imports?
I think Deborah might have a better sense of that, but it's certainly not back to the
Yeah.
70%
No,
bars.
the needle is moving very slowly, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. Mass market flowers are just dominant in the
Yep.
U.S. 50% of the cut flowers sold in the U.S. or purchased in the U.S. are purchased at the grocery store level.
Hmm.
So that big box presence is dominant, and that we didn't see, 30, 40 years ago. It's just the way consumers spend their money. So sadly, I would love to see that needle move. It's moving in very incremental, tiny ways. But what is happening is the interest in local. And so even the big wholesalers are now realizing they would benefit from buying direct from a local farmer or a regional farmer. And maybe many of them are creating these departments where they're featuring local, like, Washington grown or New York grown flowers for the mainstream floral industry. So I think it's a shift just in the conversation. I don't think imports are going to go away.
Right.
Sadly, I think that's the backbone of the floral industry, the mainstream floral industry and the conventional floral industry. But this subset that we are really excited about is when sustainability and seasonality become like a desirable beauty profile. Like I always say, it's a better way to beautiful. Like we're selling people on the beauty. We're not selling people on and scolding them for buying imports. So it's a shift. I think we can celebrate it, but I think there's lots more to do and lots more to talk about.
And there's a lot of education involved in that, as always. It seems like that always seems to be one of the hurdles in getting people to do the right thing versus the convenient thing. Not that the convenient thing is the wrong thing, but do you think that the import market really is a impediment to the growth of the flower farmer? In other words, do you think the local flower farmers are limited by what they can sell because of the flood of flowers coming in all the time?
I think yes, but there's other limitations like access to land
Yeah.
is a huge one and other resources. So I think what we are finding is that when we do grow and we do capture a market or start to grow our market, it is a strong relationship that we develop with our consumers. Scaling is the issue. It's I think that, when you put a commercial or an imported flower of the same variety next to a local one in season, the difference is obvious
Yeah.
and it sells itself. But I think that probably access to land and those types of resources, financial resources, government support, the imports are benefiting from subsidies.
Mm.
I always say to our members, don't get stuck on the price competition because if we only compete on price alone, we know the labor issues and the environmental issues are much better regulated in North America and maybe not in a country that's exporting to the US. So you might lose on price. And that's where telling the story of the flower farmer and connecting that romance of maybe perhaps someone's childhood memory of grandma's garden or the flowers they carried in their bridal bouquet, like these emotional conversations all of a sudden ignite people's imagination. And that's what these stories in the book are all about is we told Xenia's story about how she came to flowers. And I think the reader can see themselves in that and say, oh, why wouldn't I be buying local flowers? Why wouldn't I look for someone like her in my own backyard who I can support?
Yes. And that's what I want to talk to you
Mhm.
about, Xenia, right now. And that is from what we've just been talking about, some of the hurdles that all flower farmers are facing collectively, no matter where they are in the country. Tell us your stories, Xenia. How did it come about? Exactly more of what you're
Sure.
doing and bring us into your world.
Like many other flower farmers, I come from the corporate world. I am from New York, Manhattan, Lower East Side, and went to university and graduate school and ended up in finance in corporate America. And yeah, beating the pavement on all of that. And at some point, I think it got to be a lot stress wise, and it took a toll on my health. And I was diagnosed with cancer. And at that point, I decided to leave the corporate world and focus on my health. And while my family, to some extent, did have some agricultural past, it was not in the last couple of generations. As I started to heal myself, mostly through herbs, to fortify my immune system, I started growing my own food and especially growing my own herbs. And I think at that point, I found not only healing, but joy and inspiration, and it became a passion. And that was my bridge into flowers. So, the silver lining, if you will. And I started, like I said, with herbs and herb gardens. I went back to school, got certified at the New York Botanical Gardens, and really started with edible landscapes. And from edible landscapes, regenerative, full blown landscapes, and then eco gardens became a focus and kind of a niche for me, and in particular, cutting gardens. So I do floral and garden design. And on the garden design, I really focus on eco gardens. So minimizing lawn and incorporating pollinator gardens, native gardens, meadows, flower gardens, cutting gardens, combinations of vegetable and flower gardens. So whatever the space is, no matter how small, patio, fire escape to acres of backyard, teaching, encouraging, inspiring others to improve that land and make it productive, make it biodiverse, make it work for you and for everyone, including the environment and habitat. So I started with herbs, and now I focus on growing flowers and herbs. And I use my herbs not only in bouquets, but and culinary purpose. I dry them for teas. I use them as dried flowers in arrangements. So herbs are still a major focus in what I grow. And then I layered in flowers.
And I like that you have several income streams related to your horticulture background now with your growing skills. So you've got a couple avenues to revenue, which is great. But I think I heard Deborah say that you've got a good connection now with some florists and you're supplying a good
So
amount of
I
cut
think the
flowers.
pillars of my business fall under kind of we grow, we design, and we teach.
Okay.
So on the growing side, I do a lot of growing and I offer those flowers to designers on a wholesale basis, but I also have a flower CSA. And so the local community comes and picks up their weekly bouquets. I also offer them as what do you call it, for free, if you will, to our seniors and to other local groups. So I really make it a big community, attraction or connection. So it's important to connect because I do still, through everything, weave the joy and the healing and the that flowers can bring. So especially to our senior community. And then on the designing, I design gardens and install gardens, but I also design florals for weddings and events. And then on the teaching side, we have on-farm events. So we do hands-on design workshops, gardening workshops, tea workshops. And then digitally, I created a course called the Eco-Friendly Cutting Garden. And it's really teaching gardeners how to garden like a flower farmer. So how to do so, how to create beautiful flowers, grow flowers and create beautiful designs with them, both bouquets and centerpieces, but how to do it in a way that improves biodiversity, that nurtures the soil, that is regenerative, and that you can kind of incorporate it into the current landscape that you have.
Wow. And what type of time frame are we talking about from the time that you realized you were interested in herbs and growing edibles to where we are today? That you've packed a lot of stuff in that few minutes that you just talked, and
So
how long that took.
I was diagnosed in January of 2010.
Okay.
And so give myself a year or two
Yeah.
to work that out. And I would say that in 2012, I started Sweet Earth Co. with the support of my friends and family. As I was already growing for myself, you start growing for your friends a little bit. And they're like, well, why didn't you do this? Because you're so passionate about it. You're knowledgeable. Other people want to learn from you, want to buy from you. So I started Sweet Earth Co. And it's been since May 2012. Everything evolved over time. And as I expanded my knowledge of things, or I became more passionate in other things. So as I kind of layered on my knowledge, I incorporated it into my business plan.
Perfect. Okay, Deborah, on your 29 features,
Yes.
draw out for me, if you can, this was my first question I was wondering, was I'd like for you to identify some of the recurring themes and common threads that emerged among, if you can, all the
Yeah.
farmers that you spoke with. What were the common denominators?
Yeah. You can see me sitting here with a big fat grin on my face because I'm so inspired by what Xenia is doing. And she's like a case study for what so many small scale floral entrepreneurs are doing. And that's what we tried to capture.
Yeah.
When Robin and I invited these folks to be in the book, and by the way, Joe, I could have had 1,000 people,
Oh,
1,000
God,
flower
gosh.
farms in this book.
No
It's
doubt.
tough to narrow it down. We tried to have geographic diversity, generational diversity, ethnic heritage representation to try to capture a snapshot of North America.
Yeah.
But one thing that we really did notice is there are some prevailing profiles or personas of the types of people who are drawn to dive into flower farming. You know, we all maybe have our favorite Pinterest board that we've saved of cool photos. When I used to be a contributing editor to Country Gardens magazine, every single issue there was a profile of a flower farmer. Not because people who read it wanted to be farmers, but they wanted access to that sort of flower farming adjacent lifestyle. So this isn't new, but it's really fun to say, okay, who are these people? So the wellness and healing is definitely the one path, as Xenia's illustrated in her very personal story. And Xenia, thank you for sharing that. It's really helps a lot of people who maybe are struggling with cancer to see what you've done. We have the corporate escapee, which she also is, but in the book, there are people who've left Wall Street, who've left high profile government jobs and, you know, professional jobs just to maybe follow a lifelong love of the earth, maybe that began as a child, but they never gave themselves permission to do that. We have a person in the book who was a high profile architect. We have somebody who was very, very well known in the fine art appraisal world who said, and Katie Tolson, who farms near Xenia, she said, I should have just gone into horticulture when I was a teenager, you know, but I didn't know that was a professional option. And now she's left her job as an appraiser at one of the big auction houses internationally to grow cut flowers. We have the generational family farm for sure. I don't want to discount that because there is still, you know, the mom and dad who've been farming maybe for 30 years are now ready to hand off their farm to, you know, to the next generation. And back to land access, that's one way that farms are transferred is through family land ownership. We also have people who are have come from the floral design world, and this is what one reason why I really advocated for using the word grower in the subtitle is that people like Holly Chappell and Max Gill, who are top of their game, high end 5 and 6 figure weddings in ballrooms around, Max is in the Bay Area, Holly's in the Washington, D.C. area. They came to flower farming for an artistic reason because they couldn't find the varieties they wanted for their designs, and they started growing. And in Max's case, he wanted clematis. He is a clematis expert. You don't find clematis in giant inventory at wholesalers, but loves growing it. It's a distinct feature of his beautiful wedding work. And now he's growing for his own designs. In Holly's case as well, she needed quantities, and she couldn't always trust that she would get the quantities for her weddings. So she is growing on her own land. So there's just all these wonderful stories that show the possibility of this can be a viable industry. It's not, I do not want to paint it as we're wearing our gingham dresses with our baskets over our arm, filling it with flowers and skipping down the aisles. It's grit, right, Xenia? I
Yes.
mean, the glamour is maybe on Pinterest or Instagram, but the grit is behind the scenes. But people are willing to talk about that and be very honest about the highs and lows. And despite that, why do they keep growing cut flowers? That goes back to that emotional tug of quality of life.
Not only quality of life, but two things. It's like the magic of growing something, but also, that smile that you put on somebody's face when you hand them a bouquet of flowers that you grew.
Yeah.
I think those are the two things that do it for me.
Yeah. Good.
And I think gardeners, I mean, Joe, you know this, when you grow something that you harvest from your own vegetable garden and you can take it to, a picnic or to neighbors, there's some sense of pride there.
Yeah.
I grew those tomatoes.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And there's joy in the handoff too, for sure. I've been in that role many times. Deborah, do you have any stats, or maybe it's more of a personal observation? I was just curious as I was listening to you all talk, of all the people that kind of take on flower farming as their second or third career, compared to the number of people coming out of horticulture school or wherever they would go for training professionally to become a flower farmer as their first career. Do you have any sense of a ratio there? Is it 1-to-1, 2-to-1, et cetera?
That's a great question. I only know anecdotally.
Yeah.
We have several college professors who are members of Soul Flowers Society, and they are teaching in sustainable agriculture programs. And also one is a art professor at University of Arizona, and she's trying to introduce floral design as an acceptable form of fine art. So there are people at the college level who want to do that, but I think that there are maybe only a dozen or so, under 20 for sure, horticulture programs at the college level in the US that have floriculture as a track. It's very small, and it has shrunk, I think, along the lines of Xenia's reference to maybe 30 years ago when our whole industry shifted from domestic growing to imports. That affected the industry as well. But there is a renaissance going on, and I would say, well, we've all seen it. That what's the starter drug for gardening? It's probably a tomato. It's probably some kind of beautiful, lettuce greens or some edible herbs, like Xenia said. And then during COVID, and Joe, you know these numbers, there were 20 million new people said to have picked up the trowel and started gardening during COVID. And we saw the surveys, and the interesting thing is that it included more men than ever and more younger people than ever.
Yeah.
So the research about, the physical and mental health benefits of just growing and tending to plants has propelled more people to pursue this. For flowers specifically, there are people who get into flower farming early on, and I am a little envious of them because they get a jump start on the old timers, but I try to use the word emerging flower farmer rather than old or young.
Yeah.
So anybody can do this. It is interesting that it often becomes a second career or a second or third chapter in someone's life, maybe when they give themselves permission to do the unconventional.
Yeah. And what's great is that we're teaching each other with organizations like the Slow Flowers, like the American Society of Cut Flower Growers. with courses like the one I've developed and other flower farmers and their courses. We, our Facebook groups, all of that, we reach out where we like to help each other. We like to support, encourage, and help each other through challenges or just questions. So I think that's, rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
And if we kind of work on this together, we can really make more progress on moving the needle for local product and local farms.
That's
Xenia,
such
I
a
think,
good point.
yeah, it is. And I think you're looking at my notes, Xenia, because that's exactly where we were going to go on this next question I had for you within the context of a broader question. But
Mhm.
that was definitely hard right into the middle of it. But the question was going to be, farming is hard no matter what you're growing, but given the current state of things as we know it right now, all this craziness that's going on, has that added to the challenge, or has it maybe in some ways opened up new opportunities for small scale flower farming?
I think what the challenges are there, and there are some that are growing. So, for instance, the price of seed or the availability of certain seed, the price of bulbs, that is getting a bit more challenging. But we are a resilient group. And so we are finding ways to save seed or to barter and trade. So I think that it's a matter of just finding the workarounds.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I think, Xenia, you referred earlier to the community that you've created with clients and customers, and I am seeing a lot of this innovation happening, Joe, where there is a lot of kind of secondary revenue channels that are being developed by flower farmers. Zinnia's touched on a lot of them, but people are saving seeds, and a lot of small scale flower farmers have their own dahlia programs for tubers. They have
Yeah.
their own, they're selling tulips and ranunculus that they've vetted to the home gardener who can buy on a small scale.
Mhm.
These growers also all tend to create collectives in regions, I mean, either formally or informally, where they're maybe bundling their purchases to meet the minimums of a particularly desirable, back in the day, everybody was hot to trot about a specific, I don't know, the cafe au lait dahlia, where like we had to get our hands on it. So we had to share our resources to buy that. I'm also seeing a lot of innovation in floral tourism. And
Mm.
Zinnia also talked about this, where these are other ways that farmers can make a living from their land, not just from flowers, but they can
Mhm.
have farm to table dinners, or they can have rent their farm out for weddings, which is not for the faint of heart, but people do it. And there's money to be had there. And there are interesting collaborations happening where a farm I just visited in Iowa has a big Saturday morning yoga program where, you know, the city folk are invited to come out to the farm and take a yoga class amongst the flowers. So it's just all these things that do fit into the lifestyle of living on a flower farm and making your living from that farm. The challenges, I think, are absolutely correct that Xenia has mentioned, but I think there are workarounds because people just, I don't know, I think that there's a real openness to doing something non-traditionally and unconventionally that I celebrate.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the value add. It's an edge we have on the imports. So in addition to seasonal beautiful flowers, we have that direct connection to the farm. And people love coming to the farm to not only pick up their flowers, but for any on-farm events or tours and collaborations. And again, I'm expanding into ecotourism, and so farm stays or um, dinners or anything like that is again a value add that we can capitalize on.
I'm so glad you used that word value add because in the end, a flower is a commodity. We're trying to
Hmm.
elevate local flowers to the couture,
Mhm.
highly specialized luxury level so that they're valued as more than a commodity.
Yeah. And Zinnia, the more I hear you talk, the more I realize you're putting your business and your finance background to good use here with all of your entrepreneurial avenues that you're taking. So kudos to you for that. But
Thank
on
you.
that note, and Zinnia, you may be really plugged into this firsthand, but both of you, please, I'm interested in your input here. But, you know, along with the current state of affairs in this country, at least, with labor shortages and cost? And I know with flower farmers, oftentimes we are a small operation. We're
Right.
not really bringing in a big labor force. But other than that, how's the competition? Are you able to get all the business that you can scale, or are you faced with competing like any other industry?
I would say I am seeing more competition from local flower farmers offering CSAs or in markets. I think markets do a pretty good job for the most part in limiting the number of flower farmers at a particular farmer's market. That's helpful. The CSAs, again, it's collaborating with other local businesses. So I think, again, we can coexist. You can specialize as well. I mean, I love spring flowers and ephemerals and bulbs, and then I focus on dahlias. Um, I can also, in the summer, really focus on growing flowers that are great for drying. So there's a lot of ways that you can niche or specialize so that you can capture as much of the market as you want. It's a huge market. We
Mhm.
have not tapped into a tenth of it yet.
I agree with you completely.
I think that there's a lot of opportunities still. Again, land and labor are our two biggest challenges.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things that people are trying to do, I've witnessed this a lot. And Xenia talked a little bit about growing annuals that can also be dried. This awareness that every plant I grow must pull its own weight and
Mhm.
must do 2 or 3 things. Like, this is why more people are getting into perennials, Joe, because once you plant that perennial or the woody ornamentals, it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. So you're able to reduce the planting labor and even in some cases the weeding labor because you've got this perennial that keeps coming back and maybe it's not as intensive as an annual crop. And then if you have annuals that can, in Zinnia's case, when she grows herbs, she's got so many purposes for that herbs. I don't think you ever have a leftover herbs, Zinnia. You've
Mm-mm.
always got
No,
something.
because I also use them in my, pest management system. So
Yeah.
it's I think that one of the things besides I think that's one of the tenets of regenerative farming and which is and permaculture as well. It's just making sure that whatever you are planting or seeding has a multi-purpose,
Mhm.
can be something that nurtures the soil, something that can be edible, or something that can be dried, something that is, great in a design in a bouquet, but also can be pest management or has other functions in the
Yeah.
garden for you.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I want to do besides making those choices is teaching people how to make those choices. And the one thread that I think really we want to explore more and highlight more is people's connection to soil. So they love the flowers, they love the plants, but I really want to get them as excited about soil as they are about flowers.
Make soil sexy again, right?
Yeah.
I'm on board. I'm already there. I'm on board with that. But are you talking about the customers or your fellow growers?
Well, the growers are there. I mean, they're
Yeah.
starting to
Okay.
understand that some of the old traditional practices, agricultural farming practices, were depleting soil. And we have found through the works of some great scientists out there how we can really create beautiful, high quality flowers by focusing on the soil. And
Wow.
so, flowers that can withstand disease and pest infestation because we're focusing on growing soil, and the plants can take care of themselves.
Well, I'm really convinced now that you have some way of looking at my notes because uh, my next question was going to be about that pretty much. And that was just how are growers helping customers understand the value of local flowers compared to imports? And Deborah, you touched on this at the start of the show. But maybe now if there's anything more specifically we can talk about. I didn't see that one coming, Xenia, that, we're gonna get them on board with the soil. I'm all for that, and if I think I'm already doing my part. I'm a soil fanatic, so, yeah, all the power to us for that, but, that's one, but
Yeah.
some other ones that come to mind maybe we didn't touch on, if there are some?
Well, there was a saying that dates back probably 20 years, know your farmer, know your food.
Mhm.
And it did align with the slow food movement. And I think whenever we can put the face of the farmer on that flower, it does heighten people's appreciation for the fact that there's a story behind that flower and who grew it. Connecting consumers with local flowers is sort of my mission and passion, and it really is done through storytelling, Joe. And you know, you're a storyteller, you know this. We have surveyed the last 3 years consumers in a partnership with the National Gardening Association National Gardening Survey. And the most recent survey we asked, and that's a scientifically correct survey. I think you've been involved with that before, where 2,500 households are asked certain questions, mainly about gardening. But Slow Flowers has come on and asked, what are the reasons that you're buying local flowers? And just rank them. And the top reason was keeping my flowers local, then followed by keeping agricultural jobs in my community, reducing the carbon footprint. Like all these reasons are being, now we gave them the list and asked them to rank it. I don't know if we had a blank page, whether we'd get the same answers.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, but it's really, it is encouraging to see that if somebody's already shopping at a farmer's market, they probably have a heightened awareness of this. If they're shopping, through a local collective, we mentioned our mutual friends at Jello Mold Farm. They're part of the huge Seattle Wholesale Growers Market Cooperative, which is 16 farms in Oregon and Washington have come together to become a flower hub, which now not only sells to professional florists, but sells to the public. And the public, as a bucket, is the number one customer at the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, because those are people who love local flowers and they do want to get their hands on what the florists get. And they're willing to shop at hours that are maybe later than the florists. Let's give the florists first the earliest shopping hours of the day, and then the public can come in at, say, 10 a.m. and get equally fresh local flowers. And so I think these flowers sometimes sell themselves.
They do.
And we've got to get that in front of more people, and then they start getting excited about the story.
I was thinking about that as you were bringing that topic up. I feel like one of the biggest barriers flower farmers have to scaling up is probably not being able to be where the consumers are when they are trying to be as efficient with their time as possible, and they're in the grocery store and they're getting this and that, or the bigger stores, they're picking up the flowers at the same time. And it'd just be nice if flower farmers could have that spot where there's more people coming to get more things at the same time. That would be nice. But
otherwise you kind of are in the transportation business, and that's not why you got into flower farming.
Right.
Xenia, you're close enough to a dense population area where people want to come to you, but that's not the case with all flower farmers.
And that's where these collectives are so valuable, because we can sell into the collectives. We can buy from the collectives if we have a big event and we just don't have enough product or enough variety or whatever.
Oh, yeah. You do that with the Connecticut group, right?
Yeah. So there's a Connecticut Flower Collective. There's also Hudson Valley ones that are nearby. So that's another way that we can support each other.
It's funny, when I started the slowflowers.com website in 2013, so it's been out for a long time, I thought that the main user was going to be just the average flower lover who wanted to search by zip code, state, or city and find a farmer or florist that they could buy from. That would be like a B2C, business to consumer. But really what has happened is what Xenia just described. It's B2B. Farmers are using it to find florists to sell to. Florists are using it to find farmers they can buy from. And then there's all this wonderful harmonic convergence that happens when people find each other and can enhance each other's businesses by supporting one another and collaborating.
Okay. Let's bring this to the hobby grower, for example. First of all, I think maybe one of the biggest barriers, at least psychologically, is the possible misconception that they don't have enough room where they live to start a small flower farm. Can we speak to that?
That's great. Xenia teaches how to grow a small cutting garden. So, what do you recommend size-wise for that?
You can start as small as container gardens. But in the course, I teach a 3x10 space. And in there, you can get your focal, your filler, your greenery seasonally from, spring through fall. So a 3x10, and that's when you really start to get comfortable with growing flowers, and then you can expand, you can add, you can incorporate perennials into your landscape instead of having just a dedicated cutting garden space. You can really roll in natives, especially keystone natives, into your landscape area so that you can look at everything in your garden as something that can be snipped and put into
A design ingredient. I agree.
design ingredients. So you can start with containers and take it from there. It can be as small as that, but you can certainly get a bouquet a week from a 3x10 space.
And for somebody that wanted to maybe take it to that entry level into going to the farmer's market and so forth, is that the same amount of space that you're talking about for that entree level there too?
To sell into so no, that's for the hobby.
Okay. Yeah, that's how I said it.
Gardener who wants to do bouquets for their
Okay.
home or to share with friends and family. I think if you want to go from kind of backyard bouquet to a
Yeah.
business, then you need to be a little more strategic about it and start thinking about what are those ingredients, those bouquet ingredients per week for the season. And then plan it
you
out
need to
that way.
crop plan then, right?
Yeah. You need
Yeah.
to create a schedule, a Google Sheets or an Excel, and figure out, when you're going to seed, how long it takes to germinate, how long it takes to grow it, when is it ready to harvest, learn proper harvesting techniques. As it's doable.
So it's not
But
just growing pretty flowers.
it is.
Math is involved.
Yeah, there's math too.
If you just want to create bouquets for your home and for friends
Yeah.
and family,
Yeah.
that's where you start.
Yeah.
I want to just point out in the book, and this is the chapter that is Xenia's, we have this 2-page spread at the end of each chapter or farmer profile that is sort of like the cliff notes of that cultivar or specialty flower. In Xenia's case, it's on herbs, and she's provided her favorite herbs. She's also talked about best times to plant, when to harvest, and then how to use herbs as pest management. But in other cases, it's specifically about one cultivar, like here is
Right.
just the chapter on snapdragons. So it's a way, I love it because it's a shorthand. It's like immediately at a glance, you can get enough information to decide maybe what's the farmer's favorite cultivar. And if so, I'm only going to buy 3 seed packets of snapdragons. And so these are the 3 best ones to get started on. We all came to gardening sort of through trial and error, right? Because we were taught by someone, maybe a family member or a friend. And we all want to study and self-educate and take classes, but putting that seed in the ground is really okay to just start there. And that's what Xenia is getting at with even a container. You could plant your sweet peas in a container, put a few stakes in to trellis them, and you'll have a beautiful, and if you keep cutting from them, they'll keep producing and you will have multiple bouquets.
Just start with what you love.
Yeah. Same thing with food growing. You don't have to grow it all. There's a lot of
Right.
options that you don't maybe like to grow or eat. Just stick with what you love. Let's bring this to a close with a couple questions.
Mhm.
And one would be looking into your crystal ball. What trends or shifts do you think will shape the next decade? I know that's a big ask, but just think big for small scale flower farming in the US.
What I'm seeing that is getting people more excited than anything else I've seen in the last few years is that the small scale flower farmer has become a flower breeder. And so many people are doing their own crosses and selections and trying to introduce new varieties of annuals, zinnias and celosia and cosmos. I mean, all those old-fashioned favorites are now getting pushed to see how far they go as in the breeding. What that does then is allow the flower farmer to have another stream of revenue where they're selling maybe a selection that no one else has. And I'm seeing that also happening in perennials and woody ornamentals. There's just a longer ramp up time for that. And even in dahlias, people are crazy for their breeding. So I think that's exciting because that gives somebody a distinction and maybe a level of expertise that they can share with others.
Good.
And something that I'm doing, but I'm seeing other flower farmers do as well, is really incorporate natives into the cut flower garden. And that is both in two ways. In your kind of straight rows, this is I'm planting a whole row of this particular native and using it as a specialty cut flower to in bouquets or wedding work, but as well incorporate eco gardens around their flower farm, so that you're sharing with guests or clients who come to the flower farm to pick up their bouquet, showing them how they can incorporate these flowers into their own gardens, kind of just having display gardens or educational gardens, if you will. So really incorporating natives is one.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Xenia, you mentioned before we went live, you have an eco-friendly garden audit. What is that?
Yeah, so it's a PDF guide that helps people kind of assess their space, their backyard, their landscape, their growing area, and determine how eco-friendly is it. So it takes them through a series of questions. You kind of gauge, you rank these areas, and then it teaches you how to become better in those areas. So such as watering wisely or limiting chemicals, reducing lawn. These are all elements of becoming more eco-friendly in your own landscape. So it just teaches people how to do this assessment. And then once you have a baseline, how to improve upon it. So I think that's a good place to start for people who want to incorporate cutting gardens in particular, because that's one way that you can improve the biodiversity and create habitat for your landscape. So just make it more eco-friendly.
And that's something that people can get from you?
Yeah, so it's a PDF. I will provide the link to it, and your listeners and guests can just put in their email and download it.
All right, we'll have the link in the show notes. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Last question for both of you, and it's this. For someone dreaming of starting a flower farm today, what's the one piece of advice that you would give?
You want to go, Xenia?
I would say that really work on your mindset. Work on figuring out what principles you're really passionate about and stick to that. So it's a mindset. Every little bit helps in in creating an eco-friendly cutting garden or a flower farm. And if you just start with that mindset that these principles are important, they're learnable, if that's a word, and you can do it. And so, what's the saying? Progress, not perfection. Jeff,
Mhm.
Jeff, work on that. Just take the first step.
Good.
My advice would be to create community so you're not alone. In some ways, flower farming is very isolating, especially when we talked about labor. People don't always have the ability to hire help, and individuals or maybe people who are begging their kids to help them is all you have to work with. And I think if you can create community, you will find the joy in that information sharing and in seeking knowledge and sharing knowledge. I guess the other thing I would say is we've seen so many flower farmers getting started and wanting to grow all the flowers, right? 200 varieties.
Yeah.
And that can be completely overwhelming.
Yep.
Maybe just start with a dozen and see how you do, and then edit as you go along. I've had a few people say, I love this flower, but it doesn't make money for me, so it's out of there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of some self-conversation and seeking advice from people.
That's wisdom right there. When you can get to the point of realizing something isn't financially viable for you, you take it out of inventory.
And I think
Absolutely.
the other thing I would add, just that reminded me, is understand your market. Who are you selling to? If you're selling to a designer, there are certain varieties and flowers that are important to them. If you're selling to the farmer's market, that's a different list of flowers. So the end customer, think of the end customer and then work your crop plan around that.
Know your customer for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Great conversation. Thank you both. Good insights. I like the contrast between Debra, you and Xenia here in this conversation. And it just melded together very nicely. So thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Joe.
for being here.
What an interesting conversation with Debra, for sharing the vision behind the flower farmers and for continuing to champion the local sustainable flower movement. And to Xenia for giving us a glimpse into her work at Sweet Earth Co. and reminding us of the artistry and care that goes into growing flowers with intention. And I hope this conversation inspires you to look at flowers not just as something beautiful in a vase, but as a story rooted in people, place, and passion. And be sure to check out the notes below for related links mentioned in this episode. And as we wrap up, thanks to Amy Prentice, Brendan O'Reilly, and Christine LaFond for their help this week and every week getting these episodes ready to go. And thank you for joining me today. My goal for every episode is to help you take the guesswork out of gardening by teaching you the why-do behind the how-to so that you can become a better, smarter, more confident gardener. I'll be back here again next week for another episode of The Joe Gardener Show, and I look forward to having you right back here to join me for that. Until then, have a great week, take care, and I'll see you back here really soon.